Hi everybody, welcome back to the Chasing Psychological Safety video series. Today we're going to talk to you about the contents of a new feature in our software called the Playbook. We recognize and want to make sure that everybody who is working on psychological safety has a manual way of bringing that to their team, so they don't have to have, some huge, long, expensive hand-holding consultancy type exercise. And in fact, you've just got some tools that you can start working on psychological safety with your teams straight away. We've called it the Playbook. Clearly, we think that teams would benefit from having our software and the dashboard and the data to support the conversation and create the space for increasing psychological safety and lowering impression management. But in the meantime, we just wanted to bring you today some details of some of those exercises that you can use. So I'm going to kick us off with team relaunches. So the team relaunch is something we've talked about a lot. It's essentially this idea that every team should kickstart, but as importantly, as you're moving through your teams forming, storming, norming, you should be working to relaunch that team periodically, and it couldn't be more important right now. So working on things like ways of working and purpose. But the idea is that you are continually checking in with your team. Next, we've got the courage hackathons. So courage, being brave, feeling safe to speak up and having that bravery to speak up are essential to psychological safety. So we've brought an exercise to you which allows you to find ways to tell the stories of courage that inspire you and to make those real in your day-to-day as a team. Then we've got Humour Workshops. This might sound a bit wild, but it really works. So Humour Workshops we've got those because humour is one of the most personal things to a human being. And sharing your humour, sharing what makes you laugh, doesn't matter what it is an opportunity to relax and actually share your human side with your team, and B, it really gives people an opportunity to show who they really are, and sharing that really builds trust and psychological safety in a team.
Right, and some other of the things that we have already wrapped into this format of a play. Hello, by the way. I'll give you a couple of them as well, and then Fiona will tell you some more, and then I'll tell you some more as well. There are quite a number of them, and our aim for this video is literally to just give you some quick ideas, because we're sure you're going to come up with other ones. You have to remember that each of these plays is connected to the type of data that we see. So in other words, it's more likely that you're going to need a courage hackathon when you see your courage dropping in terms of data, or when people are less open, or it's more likely that you'd need a humour workshop when your resilience is down or your engagement is down. So in the absence of that data, it's going to be slightly harder for you to kind of decide which of these things. With that said, just have a list, even if it's a personal list, and start working on them on your own. It's a lot better than not doing anything at all. So back to our list, one other play in the playbook is called Create Team Rewards. So our software has always had the ability of giving people rewards. And this is actually inspired by one of our future clients who has asked us, when we started working together, whether or not teams could also input their own rewards, or did we have a set amount that they had to go through. We hadn't even considered this at the time, and obviously it's a much better idea, and in time that idea has refined. And what we advise teams to do is to hold at least one session, doesn't have to be very long, in which they sit down and they come up with creative ways of rewarding team members for various bits and pieces. And I know you've seen a number of these things out there where they do appreciation, where they do smileys, where they send each other a phrase. That's all very nice. We're not saying it shouldn't happen. Maybe that's the answer. But there are creative ways to actually give people things that would be emotionally significant, to give people things that are very cheap. It's a pity not to try and define what does rewarding mean for our team in particular. And that can become a very bonding exercise. Then the other one that we have been talking about quite a bunch that people seem to react to tremendously, which is a little bit worrying in a way, is our famous Team Bitch Fest, which is that very cleansing, very epiphany-driven type of exercise where we expect everyone to have a catharsis by talking about their issues and their emotional blockers in the last period. Most of these things that we have already mentioned will be detailed in some of our other videos and some of our articles. If they're not, we're probably going to get to them over the next few weeks. And obviously, the best place to find them is in the software nonetheless. Another one that I'm going to talk about is the practice of team gratitude. We say this over and over again. That's not even something that you need an entire hackathon for. You don't need an hour, you don't need 2 hours, you don't need an entire session, but you do need to try and incorporate it into your normal human work. Potentially when you talk about these things, potentially once a week in your retros, in your meetings, make sure that you set the time aside to sit down, breathe in, and really remember what has went well, or at least what hasn't went badly. What is it that we can really start reframing our mind around? This was good. This was a win for our team. And in time, at first you're going to be looking for big things. Have we launched this big project? No, we haven't. But in time, because of the way gratitude works, your mind will get retrained to start seeing positives and start seeing opportunities and start seeing things that were near bad things, but became good ones, and so on and so forth. So the idea of having a team gratitude moment incorporated at the beginning of each bigger meeting for the team is really powerful.
So next we've got the learning focus huddle. So this focuses on the idea of creating a learning team or a learning culture in a team, continuous learning practices to ensure that your team is learning from failure, safe in that failure space, really comfortable sharing and learning with each other in creative, ongoing ways, and creating that short feedback loop so the learning continues and becomes absolutely at the heart of a team's culture. We call it the DOJO intro because there are some fabulous people in the DevOps community who've developed learning environments called dojos. This is like if you were starting off on one of those, this would be a brilliant place to start. Then there's culture canvassing. So for those of you who haven't come across the famous canvases, the culture canvas is quite literally a map of how to build the culture in your team. So it has, 6 or 7 different segments. Right at the heart of that is trust and psychological safety. And this gives you the perfect visual map to start building the culture of your team, recognizing it, exploring it, building it, developing it. It can be used at all sorts of different stages with a team. And then instant teaming exercises. So we're really all working in dynamic teaming environments. We're thrown into new teams and new formations of teams, sometimes very, very quickly. And we need to start working together very quickly to pretty short deadlines. So we use some instant teaming exercises like the fast team startup briefing, which allows you to literally form a team in about 10 minutes. And that is built for things like the aviation industry and the healthcare industry. We're using those sorts of tools now in all kinds of industries to help those teams really get to work fast and in a great way.
Sure. And then the last batch we're going to talk to you about are a little bit more specific, if you wish, and they really have to do with a certain set of problems. So you're going to find that you need them, in particular if you see those indicators drop, or if you can feel that those indicators are dropping in your team in the absence of data. But one of them we call the Spotify Squad Check redesign. So many of you listening to this would have heard about the Spotify Squad Check. It's a lovely, lovely tool if you're running Scrum, if you're doing serious project management in terms of software development, where at the end of a certain period of time, for those of you not familiar with it, you'd sit down and answer some basic questions. I think there are about 10 if memory serves, where you kind of give a thumbs up or down. In their case, it's a stop sign, like you're going to have a green, red, or yellow system in terms of how you feel the last period has went about those few questions. Now, that's a brilliant model. It's used everywhere. It's a lot better than not at all. With that said, it doesn't work, in my opinion, for every, and in our opinion, in our findings, for every team everywhere. So what we would like to see happening, and what we've seen be very valuable, is if people were applying a critical thinking lens to it. So they took the Spotify model in and they just said, does this mean the same thing to our team? Are we attempting to achieve the same things? Are we missing anything of what's important to us? We've mapped in the canvas, or we said we were going to be doing, or we see to be an element that makes our dynamic more important, then it needs adding or it needs subtracting abstracting. So essentially just taking the critical lens to the Spotify model is all you need to do, so that you actually then have a better basis for your next retros if you're working in an agile fashion. Then another play that we recommend is an empathy hackathon. Incredibly important. We would say that you should probably be doing it in regular intervals. There are a number of exercises that we recommend over there. Some of them are quite, what you'd expect. You open up, you talk about your childhood here and there, you come up with a memory that resonates, that brings you to a place where you're more sensitive to other people bringing you that same type of information. You can create empathy in teams. There's also the more extreme type of exercises that you can try that have been tried and tested by the US Army or have been tried in various research labs, where people can be made to feel instant connection to each other. They're, again, slightly more, they're very uncomfortable for the team. But once you get out of there, you do have a much better understanding of each other, and that breeds a lot more positivity and a lot more openness towards each other. And then we're talking about, or we have a play called Flexibility Roleplays. Literally, it's what it says on the tin. It means different things for different for different teams, but essentially you sit down and you think, what are the situations and the occasions in which we have to demonstrate the most flexibility? What would require that we are told we should run the absolutely opposite direction and we would jump for joy? What would we need to have? So then the team leader or the team and the team leader create a couple of these situations, and then every team member spends some time describing that particular scenario and what their role would change like if that would be it, just so that there's enough mental gymnastics towards this very different reality should it hit. Obviously, you don't need it. It's almost like planning for disaster, but it's really good to get the mind into those frameworks where it is possible to be flexible. We don't always need to do things exactly the same way. And then last but not least, we've talked about this extensively, and there are a number of videos about it, the impression management catch yourself counter, which also can become, like the team gratitude, something that you do almost part of your regular meetings, simply because it creates the space for that reflection where people are reminded that it's not okay to be afraid at any one point. You shouldn't feel like you don't want to open your mouth. You should never bite your lip in this team. When has it happened for you? And when have you observed it for others? So those are essentially the plays right now. We're obviously continuously adding more. We'll try and detail some of these in some of our articles. You're perfectly welcome to compile them together somehow or other. But again, the place where you'd find them all is obviously within our dashboard and within our software. But come talk to us and we'll try and help, even if you can't afford to get, or if you're not one of those companies that is allowed to be remote, we'll still attempt to help you at least describe some of these for your benefit. Thank you so much for listening to us today, and we'll see you next week then.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.